Okay. Hi, everyone.
Hi everyone. Today I'm with Marti Epstein. She's a composer, pianist, and professor of composition at Berklee College of Music, as well as the Boston Conservatory. Well, how would you like to describe yourself?
How would I like to describe myself?
Mm.
Well, on my social media handle, it says that I am a composer, a pianist, a hockey mom. I'll explain more about that in a second. And an absent-minded professor. So.
I remember that.
Hockey mom because my son used to play hockey. Actually, he still plays hockey, but he's an adult now. But once you're a hockey mom, you're always a hockey mom. It's like a club that you cannot get out of, no matter what. So.
Cool. Well, I know you were teaching right before this. What course were you teaching?
On Tuesdays is my Boston Conservatory Day, one of my Boston Conservatory days. So I have 8 students there, and I had 5 of them today. So I was just teaching Luis Angel Tamayo. I don't know if you know him. Do you know him?
I know.
Pranav knows.
But,
Yeah, you probably know him. He went to BSO with Pranav last week, so he's good friends with, and he knows you. So
maybe.
no, he definitely knows you.
Okay.
He said he knows you because I told him, guess where I'm going after your lesson. So
Okay,
anyway.
cool. Well, but what course were you teaching?
No, it was private lessons.
Oh, I see.
Private lessons. So at Boston Conservatory, I only teach private composition lessons. I shouldn't cover my face when I do this. I only teach private composition lessons. And then at Berklee, I teach counterpoint, tonal harmony, contemporary techniques of tonal writing. This isn't all in one semester, but this is from this list is what I get assigned to teach. Music of John Cage, music of Toru Takemitsu, music history, concert music after 1945, all of those things. And then some directed study as well.
Right. Well, so I was planning a segue into all of this, and I guess my segue was supposed to be, how would you contrast like this, like teaching, let's say, tonal harmony, tonal counterpoint, with teaching more contemporary music things? Because I guess there's multiple differences. Firstly, like all that tonal music is quite established and has been around for centuries, and therefore the educational practices around them have also been around for centuries. So like, for instance, species counterpoint, that's been here forever. And I bet teaching that is a different experience than teaching something like the Takemitsu course or the contemporary techniques course, because firstly, because of the difference in time, like the time that they have existed, but also additionally, I think it's because the aesthetics of both of those things are so different. Like the older stuff, it seems more unified, but teaching contemporary music is so much more fragmented because you could teach serialism maybe, or you could look at Sariyaho, or you could look at Feldman, and there's all these like different composers. How would you contrast teaching those different music things?
That's a really good question because I try to teach counterpoint, for example, from a compositional perspective. So I try. We can't escape Bach. We can't escape him. He's probably the most brilliant contrapuntal composer who ever lived, and he's the composer from whom we get all of our guidelines for writing counterpoint. Having said that, every piece he wrote does something that's seemingly breaking from the rules. So I try not to teach the rules. I try to teach musically what makes sense. Musically, if we're trying to imply a harmony, which are the best notes to choose. And we're starting this tomorrow because we just finished the midterm projects. I try to come at their final projects from a musical perspective, and I try to get them to understand counterpoint from a musical perspective and from a creative perspective. So in that way, it's actually not that different from the way I teach contemporary techniques, only because it's, we're looking at composers, we're looking at why they wrote the music they wrote, what makes their music sound the way it does, what their most dearest held feelings were about writing music and what were they trying to say. So it's not actually different from Bach than it was from, Kaya Sariaho or someone like that. And every composer that I teach in every class after counterpoint was influenced by Bach. Every single composer has some relationship to him, whether they're directly influenced or their teachers were influenced or they're rejecting him, but that's still a relationship. Mm-hmm. So Takemitsu, whom you mentioned, his favorite composer was Bach. His favorite Western composer was Bach. He started every day of composing by playing the chorale from the St. Matthew Passion, every day. So we can't escape that guy, so we might as well start with him in counterpoint class.
Well, that's insightful, because I thought teaching those different courses would have been quite different, but it doesn't seem like it. It seems like you approach it from a similar principle, which is, composition. Yeah. So that's cool.
Yeah, I try to.
Would you say it's easier to seek an individual voice more so in contemporary context as opposed to those older, let's say Baroque counterpoint? I guess that's basically what it is, right?
Yeah. What's interesting about that is, I do think that to a great extent. But I've been teaching counterpoint and tonal harmony, but counterpoint specifically for 33 years. And I'm only 40, just kidding. And I have never had two students write the same final project. Like, every final project is different. Every final project is unique to the student who's writing it. Everything that the students do in that class, if they're really taking it seriously, is a reflection of who they are, and I can discern the student's personality in their projects. So while it might be more accessible, maybe is the word I want to use, for a living composer, or more possible for a living composer to find their own unique voice, you can still find a composer's personality when they're modeling another style or when they're imitating another style, if they're really paying attention. I have, and this isn't going to surprise you, I have some students who just like throw a bunch of stuff into Finale and hand it in and say, here's my project. That, I don't even really think about that, They're trying to follow what they think rules are, and they're not trying to think of the music. But when a student's really trying to think of the music, they have their own personality, even in the modeling pieces. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess my personal experience, as you know, I was a composition major, and I suppose I like to think that my personality really came through with those contemporary music courses, as opposed to some of those, Baroque counterpoint or tonal harmony type projects. I guess there's many different confounding factors, like, maybe I just became more receptive to my own voice later on, and maybe that's just when I happened to take those contemporary music courses. So I don't know. I guess it's complicated, but
it's complicated, and I feel like what you experienced in the core courses were, I would argue that they were your building blocks. And everyone has those same building blocks, but everyone internalizes them differently. Everyone internalizes them based on their own, their own experience and what they want to say. Even John Cage had those same building blocks. He didn't study Bach, but he studied with Schoenberg, and Schoenberg was teaching him, Bach-style counterpoint. So we need those building blocks. I was just telling a student today, they want to write an orchestra piece, but they don't want to study any orchestral music. They just want to start and write an orchestra piece. And I said, you can't jump in the river in the middle. You have to jump in at the beginning to know how you're going to get to the middle. I was met with resistance.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I guess that maybe the student was experiencing this mindset of, I don't want to get influenced by anyone. I just want to, be myself and, project my own voice. and actually, I guess you might have seen this. A composer who recently gave a master class at Berklee, who shall remain unnamed for the sake of it, said that in order to develop an individual voice, at least this composer likes to tune everything else out and just likes to shut everything else out. You know what I mean?
Do I know this composer?
I think so, but that's
Was
not.
I at this composer's
Well, yeah, I think you were, but
Interesting.
I know you don't think.
I
I know
don't
you don't
think
feel
that.
that way.
I don't feel that way at all. I think it's not possible. I think that a composer's individual voice is a reflection of who they are and who they are with regards to all of their life experiences and all of their influences and all of their influences, and it all comes together to create your voice. And in fact, I would say the opposite is true. To find your voice, you need to be receptive to everything that you've heard or everything that you hear. So here's a small example, and not that I'm putting myself as, the paragon of individual voice, but I had this Kanye song stuck in my head. I was writing this piece for solo piano, and I don't remember the name of the song, but it's the one that starts with the solo piano note. I think it's like an E or something, and then the next note is the D sharp down an octave. And that was stuck in my head, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to put it in my piece. And if I had said, no, I cannot be influenced by Kanye because he's a terrible person and I don't like that kind of music, is denying myself the opportunity to put something in my music that ended up being pretty cool, I think. So I disagree with that composer. I think it's not possible. We're not blank slates at all. We're reflections of our life experiences, and I've been engaging with classical music since probably before I was born, because my dad was a musician. He was a jazz musician, but the music he played in the house was like Beethoven symphonies and stuff like that. And people tell me that I have a unique voice. I don't know what I think about that, because you can't really evaluate that for yourself. But my voice, whatever it is a product of hearing Beethoven's Ninth Symphony when I was 3, and hearing Charlie Parker when I was 2, and, all that stuff.
Well, side note, my favorite assignment at Berklee was actually something my piano professor gave me. And the assignment was called Idea Box. And the whole point was to gather, let's say, 2 rhythms and 2 melodies and 2 chord progressions from anywhere. And then that was like the first part of the project, and then the second part was to try and combine some of those permutations and see what you can come up with.
I love that.
And I felt like that really opened my eyes up, because it's not like I can generate things out of nothing. It is, I did start to acknowledge the value of those outside influences.
Yeah, you can't generate something out of nothing. I don't believe that it's possible. I've never seen it work well.
Yeah.
I love this idea. I don't know who this piano teacher is, but A+ piano teacher.
Well, I can name him, Christian Lee. I think I mentioned him
Oh
to you
yeah,
once.
yeah. I know who he is.
Yeah, I mean, he's awesome.
Yeah.
Changed a lot of things for me.
Yeah, I love this idea. I might have to steal it. See?
A minute or so ago, well, a few minutes ago, you mentioned John Cage, Arnold Schoenberg, the the student-teacher relationship they had. That reminds me of some of the conversations you and I have had, and I bet you can recall many others, where the student changed your mind about something.
Mm-hmm.
So in particular, I remember, it was me, you, and Jay, and we were in the Takemitsu course, and I think we changed your mind about
100%.
tonality and what that means.
Mm-hmm.
How has your experience been like interacting with students over your career, and what are some memorable conversations you've had where you really changed your mind about something?
Well, I'll talk about that one first, because I think that Berklee students aren't always as thoughtful as you guys were. And a student can change my mind about something if I know that they're really thinking about it. So just to say here, publicly, or whatever this is, what the issue was, we were talking about tonality in some Takemitsu piece. I don't remember which one it was. And I started off by making the claim that Debussy was the first atonal composer. Do you remember that?
No.
I started the conversation that way, which already irritated Jay. He was like, wait a minute, what's happening? But the reason why I said that is because Debussy's favorite scale is the whole tone scale. And the whole tone scale is inherently not tonal because there's no asymmetry in any of the intervallic relationships. It's all major seconds, the thirds are all major thirds, et cetera, et cetera. So there's nothing that's pulling the gravity towards any one pitch. The tonality that might happen in a piece by Debussy is totally by repetition. You know, in that Voile piece that I think I was talking about, he keeps repeating this B flat, and so we're hearing the B flat as kind of a tonal center, a gravitational pull. And then somebody in the class asked me to define tonality, and at the time, before I was convinced by you two, I had what I'm now recognizing as a very narrow definition of what tonality is. I said tonality is music where there's a presence of a tonal center, not just a pitch, but a harmony that's associated with that tonal center. But most importantly, that tonal center is defined by its dominant chord, and there has to be a dominant seventh chord, a major minor seventh chord resolving to the tonal center. And then I believe I said something like, and the harmonies need to be tertian, and all the harmonies need to have a specific function relating to that dominant chord. And in fact, you don't even need the tonic chord. You just need the dominant chord. And you were talking about music that has a clear tonal center that is not defined by a clear dominant chord. And I started to think about, well, the problem is my understanding of the word tonal. And then I started thinking, well, maybe what I need to do is qualify my definition by saying I'm talking about common practice tonality. Right. And you're talking about tonality writ large. And then Jay sent me like a 3-page email that he'd written in high irritation on the subway, which, I mean, I have to say, if another student had done that, I might have been upset. But coming from Jay and then the conversation coming from you, it was really clear that you guys care. You know, you cared about my words, and you cared about these things and how we were talking about music. But his email to me was basically, you know, tonality, you're also defining tonality in a very Western way. And there's a lot of music that could be considered tonal that doesn't even have triadic harmony and, you know, and all of this stuff. And I thought, wow, I do need to qualify this. I can't just throw words around willy-nilly, so to speak. I have to be careful about how I'm defining these things. So I have to say common practice tonality, because that is a good definition of common practice tonality. But there's, and I think one of the things I was trying to do is make a distinction between tonality and modality, because modality is like pre-tonal. It's on the way to being tonal, but then once tonality has been codified, then everything just sort of explodes. So like, can I talk about Taylor Swift for a second?
Yeah, it's for sure.
Okay, so a lot of her chord progressions kind of bypass the one chord. Like that song Anti-Hero goes 4, 1, 5, 6. And so, 4, 1, 5, 6, 4, 1, 5, 6. So the dominant chord isn't even doing what a dominant chord would do. And the one chord doesn't sound like a one chord. The 4 chord sounds like it's a one chord, because that's the chord we start on. And would anyone make the statement that Taylor Swift's music isn't tonal? That sounds ridiculous to say that. So then I started thinking about pop music, and I started thinking about Joni Mitchell and all of these people I love whose music is, it sounds like I'm a crazy person if I say it's not tonal. It's just not common practice tonal. It's 21st century tonal. So,
well, actually, I think I can trace this maybe to your education at BU, because I remember I had a conversation with another BU graduate,
Mm-hmm.
Don McDonough,
Mm-hmm.
and I think
Oh, he went to BU?
I think so.
He went to Brandeis.
I think he was at BU at some point.
Was he? Not when I was there.
Right.
Anyway.
But I think I remember hearing from him that his professors thought, like, let's say if it's AC/DC or someone like that, like
Mhm.
that's not tonal music because it lacks a 5/7 to 1 cadence.
Mhm.
So I guess even he thought it was kind of weird, you know?
You know, it could have had its roots at BU because I did take a lot of classes where we were focusing primarily on the tonal music of the 18th and 19th century. But I also had a lot of classes where we talked about Wagner, and Wagner is skating that edge between tonality and atonality. As soon as you start resolving your dominant seventh chord to the sixth all the time, then it's not a deceptive cadence anymore. It is the cadence. And then where's the tonal center? But I put that in the category now of what's happening in pop music. And I think I don't remember forming my current belief at BU. I think it comes more from having to teach tonal harmony for so many years and having to try to define to my students what they're doing, what they're trying to write, what their goal is in the class, and trying endlessly to get them to understand that the dominant seventh chord is always a major chord with a minor seventh, even when you're in a minor key, which they Berklee students historically do not want to acknowledge. So.
Well, so what are some other conversations you've had with students which changed your mind about things?
I think a lot of these kinds of conversations have to do with misconceptions I may have had about style, or just introducing me to artists that I didn't know. So you know how much I love Brad Mehldau, and I forgot to bring your book, by the way, but it's sitting on my desk, so I will get it to you. But I love Brad Mehldau. How did I find out about Brad Mehldau? I found out about him because one of my students, this was a long time ago, so he must have been really young, like when his first album came out or something. She brought me the CD, and she said, I think you would really like this music. And I know people who, when their students give them music, don't listen to it. But I learned really quickly that I would be denying myself learning about something really interesting. So I found out about Brad Mehldau that way. I found out about Bjork that way. And everyone who knows me knows that I love her so much. Because my very first class at Berklee, there was a student in the class, and I wish I could remember his name, but he loved the Sugar Cubes. And he was telling me, that's her band before she was Bjork.
I've heard of
Yeah. And he was telling me, oh, yeah, they have this lead singer. Her name's Bjork. She's so cute. I have a crush on her. And I'm like, okay, but what's her music like? And he played some of her music for me. And I thought, oh, my God, this is amazing. So it's less about concepts and more about just broadening my awareness of the artists that I like. And honestly, so my son isn't a musician, but he has really broad musical tastes, and he's taught me a lot about different kinds of music. He's the one who taught me to appreciate Kanye. He loves like Johnny Cash and people like that. There's a band, actually they're a duo. Can that be a band? Maybe. They're called The Lowest Pair, and it's like, roots music, and I love them. I love them so much. So that happens, the first day of class at Berklee, I ask my students what they've been listening to, and if it's something that I don't recognize or something that sounds intriguing to me, I'll write it down and I'll go listen to it, because that's how you find out about stuff.
Well, I'm happy to hear that it goes both ways, because you obviously teach us so many things. Like
Hopefully.
I mean, you certainly changed my mind about the whole handwritten versus finale thing. But it's also nice to hear that, we can, as students at least, we can, go back and forth.
Totally.
And I like what one of my EPD professors said once. It's like we're kind of we're colleagues in a way. Despite the the differences between us in terms of our skills and so on and so forth. I feel like
sure. Yeah. Sorry,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, I mean that's all I was going to say.
Yeah, I mean, I have one of my greatest joys in my professional life is when my former students get hired at Berklee or get hired at Boston Conservatory. And now we are true colleagues. My chair at Boston Conservatory was my student. He was my student. He became my friend. He became my colleague, and now he's my boss.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit awkward sometimes, because just for all the reasons anyone can imagine it being awkward. But I actually love that, awkwardness and all. I have another colleague at BOCO, Bahar Royai, who was my student at Berklee, and then she was my student at BOCO, and now she's my colleague at BOCO. I have so many colleagues at Berklee who are my students, Rick McLaughlin, Vesela Stoyanova, Timothy Hewling, on and on and on. The list is, probably even longer than I realize, because I don't remember every single person's name. But that's a great joy for me when that happens.
That's very wholesome. Well,
nothing if not wholesome.
I know you like TwoSet violin quite a bit.
Are we going to talk about that?
Well, no, we're not talking about them.
Because they don't exist anymore.
Oh yeah,
Do you know this?
I heard about that, but it doesn't bother me.
You can ask me. Well, it bothers me a lot.
Really?
Yeah. Here.
Well.
No, ask me the question and then I'll talk.
Well, that was actually a segue.
Okay. All right, let me say something about them.
Sure.
In case they watch this. Brett and Eddie. Oh my God. You gotta take care of your fans. Like, we're all heartbroken, okay? So just want to say that. I don't know why they stopped. They stopped in a really bizarre way. They just stopped suddenly. And I will say the reason why I love them so much is because they have brought a love of classical music to the general population. Their tastes are fairly conservative, but I don't care about that. They taught me to love the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto. So there you go, a piece I always thought I hated. I just wish that they had been, I don't know, I wish that they had quit in a way that felt better for their fans. Okay.
Well, personally, I never really watched their content too much. Because I guess classical music was never my cup of tea to begin with.
They would make it your cup of tea.
I guess so. But I guess I can say in their memory, we can try and react to some memes together.
Okay.
So this was the first one I had. So that's a GS. I think I wanted to tag you in this, but...
Tag someone who would fall for it. So... I can't read what the music
it's
is.
a JS Bach score.
Okay, so what's the joke? You are so excited about it being Bach and being a harpsichord that's how they would trap you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to tag you in that because I know you love Bach, and I know you like playing Bach's keyboard music as well.
I do. It's all I ever practice. Well, I've been practicing Chopin lately too, but whatever.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah, I would fall for that.
Well, so that's an easy one.
Yeah.
I think the later memes are suitable for more dense commentary if you like.
Okay. Yeah,
so
definitely.
I don't know when the video ends. Okay, there we go. Well, I've already seen all of these, so I may not laugh with you, but I found these funny, and
I do have something to say about this, because I was at a block party in my neighborhood. I guess it was 4th of July. And there's this man who lives in my neighborhood who likes to corner me and ask me about classical music and try to trip me up and say, he says crazy things like, well, of course, Bach was hugely influenced by Mozart. And I'm like, actually, and then I spout the dates, and then he says, are you sure? And I'm like, I'm kind of sure. I'm really sure. But I was getting ready to leave this party, and he put a chair down in the middle of the street. And he said, okay, you're going to sit down and you're going to tell all of us whether or not Taylor Swift is a good musician. and I said, here's what I think about Taylor Swift, and that's why this is funny. I would never call her music boring and meaningless. But what I will say is she is a great performer. More importantly, she's a good musical citizen. She's donated money to the Seattle Symphony so that they could so that they could record John Luther Adams' Become Ocean. She gave all this money to her touring team. She's a good citizen. She treats her wealth with care, and she treats her fan base with care. And she's very serious about how there are all these young girls who adore her, and she takes that very seriously. I think she's an excellent lyricist, and I'm going to stop there because I think there are certain things about her music that are interesting, like what I was talking about before with the lack of clear tonal center, but it just doesn't speak to me. Mm-hmm. So I would never call her music meaningless, but I don't think it's excellent music. But she's excellent in every other way. So there you go.
What do you think of the Mozart? Because it brings to me, it makes me think of the idea that we're kind of competing with these legends all the time. And in a way, the impact that they've had on music is hard to ignore.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about that, but what I really want to talk about is how Mozart's most famous piece, Eine kleine Nachtmusik, is actually boring and meaningless. And it's only famous because of marketing. Mm-hmm. Because Mozart himself would laugh hysterically if he knew that that's the piece everyone knows by him. So you could say that Mozart and Taylor Swift are equivalent. You could actually say that, and you wouldn't be far off.
Okay, that's cool. Well, we can go to the next one.
Okay.
Folks, that's bloody nice. That is really... That is bloody lovely.
Thoughts?
I mean, it's not wrong, but it's inaccurate actually, because does this mean hearing the same person play the same instrument in the same piece, like the same recording, or does this mean I'm going to hear 5 different people play the English horn and have this reaction? Like, yeah.
I think my interpretation of this meme was that classical refers to more common practice type music.
Right.
So
Sorry, I was personalizing it.
Right. So if they think of an oboe, the oboe, I guess, might sound similar or basically identical in a Mozart. I might be confusing my dates. Let's say Wagner or Beethoven. It might sound
Mozart
similar.
wrote for oboe.
Okay, that's cool.
There's an oboe quartet, oboe and string quartet. So.
That's nice.
Yeah.
So that's one aspect to it. But I guess the issue I was trying to get at is in contemporary music, so not classical, what they mean by classical music, there's more exploration of timbres. And that makes it more interesting. But that doesn't necessarily make it as recognizable and as bloody lovely, you know what I mean? Because it's always something new, so they may not experience the joy of hearing something recognizable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many layers to this meme because it's, I don't even know where to go with it. Okay. I think it's funny. I know classical fans who aren't professional musicians or even educated musicians who are like this. But I've also come to think recently that if anyone is listening to classical music, regardless of why they are or what their reactions are, how many times they've heard a piece, that's fine with me, as long as they're listening to as long as they're keeping the art alive somehow, which these memes are doing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I kind of enjoy these memes despite not identifying myself as a classical musician. I guess what I do identify myself as is an electronic musician, and I found this really funny because of that. Because generally I like to make all of my sounds from scratch, and I know you also expressed an interest in electronic music, and I'm sure you're aware that the timbres you can get in electronic music are vast. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a sneaking suspicion that once I actually sit down and learn Max or its equivalent or whatever, that it's going to change me forever. I have this sneaking suspicion that I know that the door is over there, and I know there's something really cool and exciting behind the door, and I'm just existing not knowing what's behind the door. And as soon as I open that door, it's going to be like Pandora's box. That's why I want to do it. But then the actual practicality of finding the time to do it, as you know, has been challenging for me.
Yeah. Well, I get that.
I'm sure.
I think I was about to say something in response to something you said, but I think I forgot. Well, yeah, you're definitely right. I think there is something behind that door.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I kind of ruined the punchline, but that's
Yeah,
okay.
sorry. That's me. Doing punchlines.
Well, here's the next one.
Okay. So, I don't find this funny at all because I experience this in one of my classes every single day. So, I teach a class called Concert Music After 1945, and the reason so I was asked to create this class as a music history elective. And I put a lot of thought into the curriculum for this class. And it's not like I only play Milton Babbitt in the class or whomever.
I think that's Webern.
Webern, who often sounds, or Milton Babbitt often sounds like Webern. Anyway, I play lots of things. I play, Kaya Sariaho and Peter Maxwell Davies and Steve Reich and Philip Glass and John Cage. I play like the full gamut of music written post 1945. But I have a few students, interestingly, they all sit in the back row, and they are real gatekeepers about what music is and what music can be. So where it says, that you get a feeling of power from commenting, where is the melody when you're hearing non-tonal music, they all do that. They say, one student, what was I playing? Oh, I was talking about John Cage, 4 minutes and 33 seconds, which is always going to be a big hit with students like that. And the student said, when I think about music, when I think about the word music, this is not what comes to mind. And I had a lot of things to say about that, which I'll share in a second. But the first thing I said was, well, why not? Isn't music contextualized sound? Isn't music made up of sounds? And he said, music is a melody and harmony. And I said, but I just played a percussion piece that you said you liked. And he said, well, I could hear melodies in it. And I thought, oh, God. And I said, let's not talk about music for a second. Let's talk about the word composer. If I say the word composer, what comes to your mind? I bet for most of you in the class, it's like some old dead guy with a white wig on. Not even someone who looks like Stravinsky or someone like that. And I said, can't we all agree that the word composer needs to encompass all genders, all nationalities, all races? Can't we all agree with that? Why are you gatekeeping about what music is? And he just folded his arms and glared at me for the rest of the class. So this meme isn't funny because it's really true that people feel so strongly about the definition of art in general and music specifically. Mm-hmm. They feel, gatekeeping is the only way I can think to describe it. They feel almost like they're being attacked if I say this tiny, short little 4.5 minute piece that's made up of the sounds in the room is a piece of music. They feel so assaulted by that. And I don't know where that comes from. And so I don't find this funny at all.
Well, I think the meme itself is kind of sarcastic.
It is. I actually really like it. Can you send that to me?
Yeah, for sure. I often hesitate to send memes to my professors.
Oh, no, I
like,
want that.
Okay, I'll send this one to you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. I think people should have a broader view on things for sure.
I mean, of course you feel that way because you're an electronic musician. And if music were only melody and harmony and only conventional instruments or conventional singing, then the amazingly rich body of electronic music couldn't exist. Like, there couldn't be music. And I have students who've written some incredible electronic pieces, and that's like how they broke open the door to writing good music.
Yeah, I think electronic music in particular, is interesting because it can lean into those abstract qualities a little more easily, especially when you listen to those academic electronic pieces, which I'm not necessarily a fan of. But I think it does broaden your mind, and I think it's worth it. It's better to have experienced those things than to not, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, there's one more meme. Let's see.
I wish this were more accurate because I feel like no one who says they hate contemporary music actually studies the scores. I feel like people who say they hate contemporary music don't know what they're talking about. People who say they hate anything. And I'm going to include myself in this because a little bit ago I said I used to hate the Tchaikovsky violin concerto. And it wasn't until I actually studied it and listened to it really carefully, and yes, Brett and Eddie talked about it, I gained an appreciation of it. When a student tells me they hate something, I say, you need to listen to 3 things by that composer and study the score, and then tell me why you hate it if you in fact do still hate it. So this just never happens. This isn't accurate. It never happens. If it happened, I think if they studied the score and found what the composer, as a human being who's an artist who wants to create a work of art, put in the score, they might like it, or they might appreciate it.
I remember, it was probably a year ago by now, but I think we were texting about something, and you said, or maybe one of us said, I think it's important to be aware of the things you dislike as much as it is to be aware of the things you like and enjoy. What has your experience been like trying to articulate your dislike of things, and how helpful that may have been for you?
Yeah, oh goodness. Most people who know me know that my most beloved composers, with the exception of Takemitsu, because I always loved him, but my most beloved composers are composers that I thought I didn't like. As a matter of fact, one of my all-time favorite composers is Sibelius. And I hated, I'm going to use the word hate, I hated his music. I hated, in particular, the Second Symphony, which, by the way, was the only one I knew. I hated it so much. I thought it had the dumbest themes, the most ridiculous orchestration. Why everyone loved this composer, I could not figure it out. So then in 1986, I was a student at Tanglewood. And Leonard Bernstein, I'm sure you've heard this story before. Have you heard this story before? Yeah. Leonard Bernstein was conducting Sibelius Second with the student orchestra. And I thought, I'm just going to torture myself and go to every rehearsal and see if I can figure out why I don't like this music. Because if anyone can reveal this to me, it's going to be Leonard Bernstein. And, within maybe the first 20 minutes of the first rehearsal, just the way he was shaping the phrases in the first movement leading up to the climax of the first movement, I was completely converted. It was like, a door opened or a switch flipped, or insert your favorite metaphor here. And I became obsessed with Sibelius because I finally understood what it was that I loved so much about it. That's happened to me with Chopin. It's happened to me with Bach. I didn't hate Morton Feldman before I knew his music, but I would have said, he's a living composer. Why would I like his music? But my teacher in college, David Lang, who's a famous composer now, had me listen to a piece by Feldman. And I had one of those life-changing experiences. I just thought, oh my God, music can sound like this? So if I had not opened myself up to those experiences, I wouldn't have some of my most beloved music that I have now. My life would be grayer and sadder. So,
Well, I think the same is true for me, especially in some of the music you've shown. I don't want to say me, but the classes I was in, certainly Feldman, Takemitsu, and even your own music. I heard your piece again, In Praise of Broken Clocks. Really enjoyed that. The piano, I don't want to say decay. Like the closest analogy I can give is like the delay effect that happens on the piano and how that relates to the harp. Like it's still stuck in my head,
well,
and
the harp, the piano, and the marimba are all doing the same music but at different speeds.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was there at the live performance,
Oh, that's
and
right, that's right.
how you was as well. He's actually in the frame of the video, so that's really
I
cool.
know, I saw. I saw.
But yeah, I think that's an optimistic note that we can end on.
Okay.
So, well, thanks for being here, and thanks for watching. As I told you, I don't really do the live stream, so the live aspect of it. I don't even know how to open the chat. I doubt there's anyone there right now because I didn't advertise it. But is there anything else you would like to say, like closing words?
Closing words. I think I'm glad that you asked me a lot about the pedagogy of composition and teaching music theory and stuff like that. Because for me, even though I wish I had more time to compose, I usually compose early in the morning before I come teach. I desperately wish I had more time to compose. For me, I don't necessarily feel a clear dichotomy between composing and teaching. I feel like the two things go hand in hand. They speak to each other. And I wouldn't want to stop teaching altogether so that I could compose. I feel like Berklee doesn't give us enough balance, but that's another problem. But the act of teaching counterpoint and the act of teaching composition lessons and all the many things I teach are vital for my composing. So
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad this went well. It's around 45 minutes. So yeah, I guess if you want to find Marti, you can look her up, Marti Epstein. I think martiepstein.com. That's your website.
That's it.
If you want to follow her on Instagram, it's Marti Epstein.
Yep.
That's it.
And Facebook, and I have everything that I would want any of you to hear on SoundCloud.
Yeah.
On and on and on. And YouTube. Don't forget YouTube.
Yeah, that's what I found in Praise of Broken Clocks.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I usually like to wait for like 10 seconds because sometimes there's a delay and the stream gets cut off.
Oh, we don't want that.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we're just going to sit.
Okay.
It's 4:33. It's like 4:33.
It is. There are things in here that make noise.
Yeah, some things. Yeah. Well, I think that should be enough.